Welcome. I'm Stephen Garvey with National Citizens Alliance. I'd like to welcome you to this special NCA presentation on constitutional rights and freedoms. We have members from across the country today to add their valuable input on this serious issue. It's going to be pertaining to the lockdown flu and the DAB and all sorts of things and how they're impacting our freedom. How does the Constitution play into this? And what can we do to go forward? We're going to look at our own Constitution briefly. We're going to bring up the Charter of Rights and Freedoms to help improve public understanding of that. We're going to look at the Oakes test, which is what the Supreme Court uses to determine whether freedoms can be limited. So we're going to discuss that. And then we're going to look at some current events. In particular, in Alberta, there was a pastor who was actually in prison for 2 days in maximum security. Apparently, there was a court order. So we're going to discuss that as a relevant example of what's going on. And we got some distinguished members here who are going to have valuable input. So we're going to get right into it. We also have your social media stream, so share your comments so we can respond to them. They will be showing up along the side there. But before I start in, I think it's important we look at our own Constitution at the NCA. And I'm just going to bring that up on screen share right now quickly. So this here is the Constitution of National Citizens Alliance. It oversees what we do as a registered federal political party, just as we have the Charter and the Constitution Act, which oversees the country. I just want to point to our values that we're coming from. And right here, quote, Article 5, values, freedom, fairness, equality, and that's equality of opportunity for everyone, transparency, accountability, and inclusiveness, especially regarding gender and minority status. So those are the core values that we're operating from today in our Constitution. And obviously, we have zero tolerance for any hate or racism towards any individual or group. And that's in there as well, but that would apply to that as well. But those are the values that we're coming from. Now, I'm going to shift to the Constitution Act, and then I'm going to refer to our panel here for their input. We're going to go right into that. I'm going to bring that up now. This is the Constitutions Act. It's difficult to find it now, but you can get it on the Justice Law's website. I'm going to point out a few things, and then I'm going to refer to our panel here. The Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. This was adopted into law in 1982. And the opening line is pretty important here. Quote, whereas Canada is founded upon principles that recognize the supremacy of God and the rule of law. So it's interesting, they have a religious component to it, the supremacy of God. What God? Is this a God that applies to all religions, or that's kind of vague there, but and also the rule of law. And then most importantly, the guarantee of rights and freedoms. Number one, the Canadian, quote, the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedom guarantees the rights and freedoms set out in it subject only to reasonable limits. So there are limits to the rights and freedoms. They call them reasonable limits prescribed by law as can be demonstrably justified in, quote, a free and democratic society. So that's pretty critical there. Any comments, Philip, on that?
I think that's a great lead-off point to really express that the Charter of Rights and Freedoms is a law that can be demonstrably justified in a free and democratic society, meaning all laws that should be tested by our Constitution should meet that criteria, just as a basic standpoint right at the beginning. The other issues that we have with our Charter of Rights and Freedoms is that they do guarantee some essential, very important rights for our citizens. And many of those rights today, as we've seen them, have been really trampled or infringed upon, and such that many of us can consider, does our Constitution even stand as a valid document today? And some of those rights include the freedom and freedom of conscience and freedom of religion. And you have the ability to think how you want and worship the God or other faith deity as you see fit, regardless of who that is. And we have other rights we've also seen be infringed upon, and that is our freedom of expression, our freedom of opinion. There are certain set words that we cannot say online, and we all know where they are. And this is not a free way to carry on a government and have an open discussion that can carry on structurally into the future, into success. Without these type of open abilities to have a discussion and to review properly what is occurring today in many aspects of life, there's no way to properly correct an issue. There's no properly way to see forward from the issue. And really, if everything is hiding an issue or suppression, is it really just? Carrying on from there, we should have the freedom of assembly as guaranteed in number 2, section 2C. We have literally the freedom of peaceful assembly and also freedom of association, which currently is restricted to a limited number of people. Additionally, if you have a qualm with your government law or proposals, we potentially face legal action for protesting such an issue. And there's been no additional provision to provide the citizens a way to protest where they cannot somehow incur a legal or negative infringement on their rights or something that can impinge their job. It's really become rather overwhelming.
No, that's a good. Can I add a couple of things there?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and also the freedom of the press and other media of communication. And look at the online censorship. NCA, registered party. We've been under shadow ghost ban for almost a year on Facebook.
Yes.
So, but there's nothing in the legislation in Ottawa that protects us, except for the charter. But if we try and sue, we're suing a private corporation, and the government has done nothing to prevent this. If anything, they're working with these big social media techs to promote this censorship.
There is definitely a layer over layer thematic, seemingly, I don't know what we call it, a team effort, but definitely a compelled effort whereby executive governance seems to download responsibility onto subsequent government levels or even private enterprise to essentially administer and impose what would otherwise be rules and laws of government. So our basic principle of what is a constitution, what is a charter, whereby these are the basic principles and rules by which a government should operate, those are somehow now grayed. And if just as if you were playing a sport, if there was not a basic rule of something like how to play soccer, everyone would just run around and kick a ball in all sorts of directions. It wouldn't make any sense.
Yeah,
and
I think
we know that once a government has to follow a certain set rule boundary, some of those principles are tenements that basically are sacred and should be always upheld by a government, because removing those protections and rules by which a government operates puts citizens at risk of having government write laws or create laws that directly impinge on their rights and their freedoms and their ability to essentially live as free people at any time without any repercussion.
Exactly.
If those basic rules and tenets are not held paramount and put as a true test to any law that is created, a government allows itself to be wide open to become a total tyranny and the citizens to be totally oppressed.
Yeah,
and it,
100%.
and it is
Yeah,
that
we're
dude. Yeah, sorry.
go
I
ahead,
was
finish your
so
point.
I was just going to say that it is the duty of all citizens and of a just government to maintain those sacred rights, and they should be held paramount. And something that known that through history, there's men and women that stood for really what are the rights of our people that helped develop things like our Constitution through their sweat, their toil, and their blood. People stood in great battles in history in Canada. People built structures. They farmed the land. They mined the resources that we have. We have every bit of a right to know that the principles that those people set down in the foundation of this country is maintained and carried on as a principle that we can always feel good about, morally, ethically, and just. And those things need to be maintained. And I just wanted to get that across.
No, excellent points there. And I just want to, feel free to jump in. Our other panel guests today. I think what we're getting at is this whole notion of free and democratic society. Where is the freedom? The government has the freedom to impose on the people, but the people who are exercising the free, some of them are being suppressed, right? So
Yes.
where's the free society? It's not a free society we live in right now. And I question the democratic society because we know through the Election Act that it's completely tilted to the establishment parties, and the media is tilted to them. So for smaller parties to compete against, it's like we're competing against the government. You
Yes.
understand? So the whole notion of free and democratic society does not apply to reality, right? And the problem with the charter is there's a number of things. It was never voted on by the people across the country, right?
Yes.
It was these same establishment entities that decided it.
Yes.
That's a big problem there. Um, the second problem, there's a lot of holes in this charter, and we're going to go through our constitutional amendments today. That's going to point out some of these holes in there,
Yes.
and we can
Including our
see that
5-year limitation. Sorry.
yeah, you can see that in the
Sorry.
democratic rights in the charter. It's very vague in general, but like we're being censored. How's that democratic? How is that democratic? If we're breaking the law, charge us. Otherwise, let us speak.
Yes.
Right? So I can go on to the test now. Is that okay, everyone?
Yep. No.
I'll move on to that now. So this is the test they used to allow reasonable limits, so-called reasonable limits on your rights and freedoms. And I'm just going to read here. Determining what is reasonable and justified can be a challenging task. What is reasonable to me might be very unreasonable to you. The courts have established a test called the Oakes test to help them with this task of determining if a limit to a charter right and freedom is reasonable, justified within the meaning of Section 1 of the Charter. And there's 4 components to this test. 1, the objective, limiting the charter protected right and freedom or freedom. It could be right to assemble, or it could be freedom of thought. Does limiting that serve a pressing substantial objective that aligns with the values of a free and democratic society? The establishment would argue that limiting assembly during a pandemic is pressing and substantial. The second one is rational connection. The law or action that limits a charter right or freedom is carefully designed to meet its objective. A law or action that does not effectively achieve the desired objective is not rationally connected to its purpose. So you can't you can't be what's going now with the lockdown flu, they're basically taking all our rights away, uh, even the democratic component. So look at the House of Commons. It's been so limited, and the transparency's gone there. We haven't had regular elections, right? And we're seeing restrictions on assembly and that. I'm going to go to number 3, minimal impairment. The law or government action should achieve its objective while impairing rights and freedom as little as possible. If there's an alternative method of achieving the objective that causes less harm to rights or freedoms, that alternative may be a better option. And then the fourth one is proportionality. The benefits gained by meeting the objective should outweigh the harms caused by limiting the right or freedom. The more serious the infringement on rights and freedoms, the more we should expect a real pressing substantial benefit to society is to be gained. So that's what the Supreme Court uses to justify limits on our rights and freedoms. The problem partly is that the Supreme Court judges are appointed by the establishment. So everything we're seeing is tied to the establishment. Philip?
Yes.
The media. The media is funded by them. The Supreme Court
Yes.
judges are appointed by them. And then we have multi-controlled establishment parties, right?
Yes.
So I would argue the whole thing is rigged against a free and democratic society. Greta, what do you think? Greta?
I'm sorry, I missed that. I think, like, it's almost like the charter is like nothing
It means nothing, eh?
right now.
What about you, Marcine?
Well, like,
Are you? Did you want to finish your thought there, Greta? I'll go ahead.
well, I'm really disappointed that I have the charter taped to my front door. And it's being ignored is the problem.
Hmm.
Well, Stephen, I believe in this country, every power structure is completely corrupted. I think the government has absolutely
Yes.
no interest in serving her people and exists only to further some agenda of its own. I think the propaganda machine is alive and well. That's pretty clear and obvious, since nobody can get a word in edgewise if you're not speaking their language. I think as a matter of fact, I further think the government actually has no reason to exist under its current conditions. The Queen is dead. The Constitution, the monarchy is dead. We are a constitutional monarchy for all intents and purposes. So the question I say is, by what right does this existing government even have a right to stand? In my opinion, it has no right to stand.
Yes.
Well, ultimately, they'll want to spin it and claim that they've been elected in, and that they're trying to do their best in what they consider an emergency situation. My issue is that
Yes.
at what point has there ever been a rubric to decide what's an emergency situation?
That's
And
just propaganda speak. It's just a bunch of words to confuse the matter.
Yes.
they need to come up with, they've yet to provide any sort of justification for taking the steps they've taken without, other than just to hand wring at the pandemic. I mean, I really haven't noticed Trudeau coming out with any substantive speeches or claims in this whole ordeal about how we're going to move forward
Well,
under
oh,
the new
sorry.
normal, right? They keep saying the new normal. Well, what is the
Yes.
new normal?
That,
Is it
that's
going to be?
ridiculous. The new normal, any any of that normal speak is ridiculous because we're clearly in uncharted territory. You know, I've taken quite a bit of time and effort to find anybody anywhere who's actually seen Trudeau in person. Hasn't been done for months. We started this conversation with, are these measures reasonable or justified? Is the 242 billion that the federal government spent on these so-called measures justified? Not even adding in how much the provinces spent. These so-called measures violate multiple sections of the charter, of which I've been happy to go through a fairly substantial list.
Yes.
Go ahead. Can you actually the government, the federal government, just to be accurate here, they're projected to spend $500 billion by the end of this year.
This is by the government's own record as of November 12th, 2020. So I just took it right off the government website.
Yeah, that's fine, but it's more than that.
Oh, it's much more than that.
It's about $500 billion, just the federal government alone.
Exactly.
This is basically in currency creation digitally through the central bank. Also currency printing, primarily currency creation. And where's that money going? I certainly haven't received 1 cent, and I don't want any handouts from the government. The less, the better, right? So,
It does.
I think
That's
many citizens want to earn their own living. They want to stand on their own 2 feet, and they want to know that through their own hard work, they can achieve really a dream or a success that is possible, that can carry on and be handed down to their children.
100%. They're crushing our spirit.
Yeah. I also believe too that's also a generational aspect as well. When we start looking at the younger generations, they are looking more towards the fact, hey, I get to sit here and do nothing and get paid for it. Great. Not all of them. Right? I'm not going to say it's nobody really knows the number, but I think we can see it based on, my example of who's going to the workforce and actively looking for a job.
Yes. Yeah. There's.
Yeah, exactly. So, so this is the test the Supreme Court uses. I'm going to summarize briefly. It's similar to what everyone has said now. You got the establishment entities in Ottawa. You got the media, the paid media. You got the appointed judges, right? Mm-hmm. And then you got provincial entities working with them. But realize that healthcare is a provincial jurisdiction, so it's not just the federal government. What you see going on in Alberta or Ontario, these are through the provincial authorities. Remember that.
Exactly.
Yes.
Who are working hand in hand with the federal authorities.
Yes.
And you could actually go further. They're working with the municipal as well, right?
Absolutely.
So you see, but understand that they're all doing this on UN Agenda 2030 too.
100%.
They're all committed to implementing UN Agenda 21, 2030. At the municipal level, it's called UCLI, I think. UCLI, Sustainable Cities.
Many of the grants are tied to compliance with orders as well. That if you'd like to have a pool, you would like to have that $18 million grant to build that new fire hall. Some of these conditions are attached to this money. So, especially in the municipal level, and this little issue cannot be overlooked. That every level of our government has been essentially, I don't want to say infiltrated, but to some degree compromised by parties who clearly do not represent citizens.
Yeah, exactly. And I just want to add too that, the fundamental flaw in the charter is, in my opinion, it doesn't pertain to reality. It talks about a free and democratic society, but I contend that we live in the reverse.
I think the charter as it stands is is a fair and reasonable document, but that is not our current reality. This government.
No, but it's not working because the reality is completely different.
That's because we are experiencing a government that is not in service to the peoples.
It's not just the current government. It doesn't matter which one is in.
No, this is a global matter. This is a.
But understand, Trudeau is just a front puppet.
Oh, Trudeau,
Yeah,
who is an indicted
he's just
criminal.
a front puppet. Look at Ford. Look at Kenny. They're no different than Trudeau.
Yeah. They're passing puppets of the day.
Trudeau,
There will be a new puppet down the road. Sorry.
Trudeau is an indicted criminal.
But this is part of the game.
He's got now 3 indictments.
People are because of the multi-controlled, right? Opposition, and these are the only parties that are promoted. People feel they don't have a choice.
Before Stalin became party secretary of the Bolshevik Party, he had the blood of millions on his hands. So you don't always have to be an obvious monster before you reach total power. Sometimes you can reach it precipitously through other means. And there's
yeah. I just want to talk about the pastor. I don't know if people heard on Saturday there was a pastor in Alberta who was arrested. He spent
Yes.
Apparently there was a court order legally allowing the arrest. Him and his brother spent 2 days in maximum security. The release was delayed. I don't think they were fined. I'm viewing it as an act of intimidation on a law-abiding citizen. He wasn't complying with the Alberta provincial government's health protocols, because right now there's very stiff restrictions on freedoms in this particular province. So that's a good example of what's here. They didn't go so far as to charge him. At least he was released. It shows that they're on very weak ground.
Those charges are both illegal and unlawful.
In what sense?
In that they're in violation of, again, several sections of the charter.
But you could argue that they have reasonable limits on those sections.
Okay, well,
right?
If we can,
this may end up going to the Supreme Court, and they will decide. They're going to use that process. No, but they're going to use that process. And they're going to defer to the authorities. They're going to refer to who? Health Canada, et cetera, as the overarching authorities. Philip?
Yes, I mean it is
you
unfortunate,
understand, right?
Absolutely, and it is unfortunate that our government is taking a stand and targeting some of the people that have been historically as well as currently some of the most helpful people in their communities. That is deeply disturbing. And whether you're on either side of whether you're wanting to protect in the concern of protections and the concern of reduction of spreading of infections, I think we could all agree that targeting those that, in this case of that pastor, feed the homeless, provides hope to people in times of dire need. I think those are not the people we should be targeting. And it begs the question why we're targeting individually those folks, because this pastor is not the only one who's been targeted. There's been several others across the country, and really to be made an example of. And that's not something that a just country does. We don't make an example of people and bust them down. That's what tyrants do.
Yeah.
And
so exactly.
Yeah. And we must step back and go, whoa. Is this acting within the basic principles of a just society? And in that test as well of the measures, we must question that. And I think that test should be put forward with the courts as well. And known that once you've made this a just assessment that, suspending our constitutional rights is justified, there should be a criteria as to how long, for what period, what criteria would justify a renewal or extension of such restriction, or what would also justify the cancellation of such restriction. Even in ancient Rome, a dictator could only rule for 2 years. And that was in exceptional circumstances. We don't have those basic guarantees offered today. We don't know how long we're going to be affected by these reductions of freedom. We don't know if this is permanent.
They're not going to give it back to you. Once taken away, nobody's going to come along and say, okay, people, we're good to go. That will never happen.
Yes.
They're just going to take more and more.
Yeah, excellent points, Philip.
Yeah.
I think you're bang on the mark. They used that pastor as an example. They weren't only intimidating him. I put out there. They were trying to intimidate society as a whole,
Yes.
saying if you don't follow what we're doing, this will happen to you. So that doesn't bode well. And this is linked back into the censorship, because we can't have a dialogue on this issue without being censored. So we have a one-way stream of information.
We can't gather.
Yeah. So this is a real big issue. There's some great comments. We're going to get to them in the latter stages. I think I'm going to move to our amendments. This will show some limits of the charter we have. But remember, like I'm going to say again, I don't feel the charter is reality on the ground.
Absolutely not.
And that's a problem with a lot of these courts. They operate in a theoretical bubble that doesn't pertain to reality.
Trouble is they're
Yeah. You would argue that, and some of the comments refer to that, Marcine. I'm going to shift to our amendments, and this will open our eyes to some of the things that aren't in the charter.
There's multiple parties that are violating the charter, which gives the illusion that since all the governments are doing it, it must be okay, but it isn't. It's unlawful.
Yeah, exactly.
All measures are unlawful.
So here's this. This is. Yeah, I'm just going to go through some of these amendments. Just the Constitutional Amendment 1. This is something we would assert in Article 2, Philip, under rights and freedom. The freedom of conscience and religion within the limits of extreme radical ideology that violates a free and democratic society. We believe there should be reasonable limits on the freedom of conscience and religion with very strict extremes, because we don't want ideologies to spread that will contradict and violate fundamentally a so-called free and democratic society. The second one is we're concerned about the Great Reset and the spread of the surveillance technology. You can link that into the 5G. So we have under Section 2, Philip, 2E, freedom of reasonable privacy.
Yes.
That's not in there. That's not in. There's no mention of privacy. Constitutional Amendment 3. This refers to these equalization payouts. They're actually in the charter. We wanted to take that out, subsection 36.2, because we believe it's adding to the welfare entitlement federal governments through handouts to less productive provinces and penalizing more productive provinces and decreasing competition between provinces. This is like a form of socialism, communism, we would argue.
No.
The fourth one, the Fourth Amendment, is about the right to private property, because right now there's nothing in there about that. So it would be everyone has the right to private property, except the government can take private property for reasonable public use and not without just compensation. The fifth one, and this is about the right of homeowners, families, to defend themselves against threats to their lives. So we would add in, everyone has the right to self-defense. Philip?
I would absolutely concur with that.
Yeah, there's nothing
yes.
in the charter right now that allows Canadians to defend themselves and when they're in harm's way.
Yes.
The Amendment 6 is ensuring that Canadians who act treasonous towards our country do not get protection under the charter. So any Canadian citizen or otherwise, and regardless of age, who engages in acts of war against our country and or our allies forfeits all his or her freedoms and rights under the charter.
Well, doesn't that just fit Justin Trudeau and his entire government?
Well, don't slowly focus on him. He's just a front person.
I totally get that.
Just understand that by focusing on him, you're missing the big picture.
Just keeping it
Constitutional 8. Constitutional Amendment 8. This is about establishing a clear separation of religion and state. Because we don't want we think the government, Philip, should be secular, and it shouldn't cater to certain special interests. So the House of Commons and any legislative assembly shall abide at all times by a clear, definitive separation of religion and state. We don't think they should mix the two. And Constitutional Amendment 9, this is about ensuring under Section 35 that all Aboriginal people are included in consultation. So it includes all Indian, Inuit, Métis people of Canada, coast to coast, and without restriction or prejudice. Because right now what's going on, there's corruption in the Aboriginal system where those certain groups are favored over other ones, and that's unacceptable. Any comments on these?
No,
Well, they're pretty well laid out, and they highlight what are some of the serious problems right now facing how our federal government operates.
I think we should touch on the fact that we have no way are we targeting Aboriginal rights in any way. We are respecting charter, treaty, and every other negotiated claim that has been currently standing. We do wish to bring forward, as Stephen was saying, that rights of citizens should all be equal, and that measures should be made to ensure that everyone just have an equal right and opportunity in this country. Yeah, exactly. And it's important people understand that the problems with basic freedoms today is I believe it's symptomatic of bigger issues. And there's establishment machination. It has so many components to it that is contributing to that. So, and it comes back to what is a free and democratic society? These are the problems we're facing. These huge establishment institutions that are controlling the Canadian people. It should be government of, by, for the people. We don't have that. We have what's called the top-down governance. I believe, as I've said before, that we're living right now in a soft tyranny, without 100%, question.
100%.
A soft tyranny, and you can see all the different layers to the government, the courts, the media. They're all working together to push down anyone who is challenging them
You could
and
see,
their power. And this lockdown flu has been a means to take freedoms and rights away.
that's what it's for.
Yes.
And what's coming?
Yeah.
Is it the Great Reset? That's what we believe, right? Even Trudeau said it, then
Mhm.
walked back on it, right?
Yes.
So we
Yes.
know that's coming. And we see the deployments. I've been documenting the surveillance technology that's being put up, facial recognition. I've been documenting the 5G and all that. And there's other layers. We talked about the financials, the money creation, the movement to a centralized digitalized currency.
Mm-hmm. So I am I enjoy my, well, not I just enjoy, but I do definitely I do enjoy following and reading history and try to find future trends basically from reading in the past. And I think it was Sun Tzu that actually, or it was one of the famous Chinese philosophers. I might be quoting the wrong one, but was that through seeing the past, you were able to see the future with one eye open. I think that was the quote or some equivalent thereof. What we can see today is that our government has usurped the authorities. We have a ability for them to do anything they want. Essentially, we are living in a situation where if any of us have previously traveled to a country like Cuba on a vacation, the citizens who we were talking to there lived under a tyranny. They couldn't say what they wanted to say all of the time, or only in certain areas. Gradually, certain freedoms have been added there over time, where for us, we've seen less of those freedoms and things have been gradually eroded. So we actually are living in a situation just like a Cuban citizen is living under their regime.
100%.
And yeah, and we can't forget. And our forefathers, grandmothers or grandmothers have literally stood and represented us and got us to where they are. And as their children and their ones that would be handing off the torch to the next generations, we have a duty to maintain some sort of semblance of dignity and good livelihoods for them. And we can't totally disregard that if a government is trying to really press in something negative on the people, the first way that you would do that, again, this has been done in history. We could go back to previously to the American Revolution. The British Army, they set on restrictions on the people. They prevented them from being able to form groups. They restricted their ability to assemble. They restricted their ability to communicate with others because that is anti-partisan tactics. That is how you suppress a revolution. That is how you suppress resistance and insurgency. And it seems that some of the measures that we've seen taken and the reductions of our rights have really been moved in that direction. And I think we should be deeply concerned when our government is so afraid of the people and so concerned that they must restrict our ability to talk to others and communicate with others in means that are outside of a regulated form, such as the internet, Facebook, etc., where those communications can be monitored. Why are you so afraid? It begs the basic question. And what is it that you are going to do that we should be so afraid of you? And I think those are the basic questions that a lot of us are concerned with. And one of the things that a constitution and basic rule of law where the government must follow will prevent us getting into that gray territory. And I hope that as a party and those that are listening could perhaps maybe feel or appreciate some of the concepts that we're raising and maybe join us in other discussions, join the party, and let's move forward and try to restore some sort of constitutionality to Canada. Yeah,
it's a real challenge because of the huge structures in place. This is almost like the Soviet Union, all their big institutions. And the establishment had, these are huge edifices built to control. what about all the programming of people? The information propaganda. They don't want free-thinking people. They don't want people to challenge. They want people to conform, to submit. Right? That's the country we live in now. It's a facade that this is free and democratic. We're trying to fight for our freedom. We're trying to fight for our democratic rights. We want a fair playing field, a fair electoral playing field where we can compete based on who we are and what we stand for. Right? But it's really challenging. This is all interconnected, wouldn't you say, Greta?
I would say absolutely. It's
going to get worse
horrifying.
too.
I
It's
know.
going to get worse. They're building a huge state structure, right? And that's what we're battling. So the pastors, one example, the censorship, the fear to assemble. We can look at the lockdown flu. We're not going to get into the science of that tonight, everyone. But is that a means to an end? Was that taken advantage of? Those are all there. So these are the challenges we're facing. But rest assured, people at NCA, we're going to keep speaking strongly about these issues. We're not going to be afraid. We're going to have to be careful because we want to avoid unnecessary censorship, right? We don't want to lose our platform to speak. So we're being suppressed, Philip, in some ways.
Yes, we
Right?
have to be careful what we say, and many of us as well for our jobs. We are working people. We're regular citizens of Canada. We're not entitled folk. I personally don't have a large 401k or pension, other than whatever earned in my job. But there's no great dowry for me. So we're working people, and we're trying to represent ourselves from where we see our nation today.
Yeah, and people are going to have to pick their battles. You can't go into every battle, otherwise you're probably going to get worn down. You're not going to last. So you need to pick your battles, what you're going to take on. Marcine, right?
Always wise.
Yeah, you have to be wise.
Climb that mountain one step at a time.
You can't take on every single issue. You can't go to every protest, right? And so people are going to have to decide what they can do. But I think NCA has the right voice, Philip, as you articulated. We welcome new people. The more people we have, the more diverse voice, the stronger our voice will be. So that's what we need. It has to be grassroots going forward. We need the reverse of what we have, which is top-down governance, almost like nanny government, right? We want, NC Philip thrives off an independent, self-sufficient, empowered Canadian people. That is the strongest country, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and we're the reverse. We're creating dependency on government. People are being programmed. They're being constrained. They're being afraid to speak. They're actually being encouraged to turn against their own citizens.
Yes.
Right? We could see that through Antifa and other organizations like that, which are encouraged to attack, to create division in society, divide and conquer, right?
Yes.
So that's what we're up against. I'm going to go to some of the comments now. So it's at the bottom here. Can you see this? It says, quote, TS says, "Thank you, TS, for joining us. We appreciate your input here. This gentleman, this lady, I'm not sure. Quote: Global banking cabal wiping out paper money. Crypto will collapse. Bill Gates will rescue you with a stable coin, a digitalized, centralized currency. Could be a globalized, centralized currency. Could be coming. Marcine?
Yeah, it'll come through the banks.
Yeah, so paper money
Yeah.
will be no more.
Paper money's going
Mhm.
no matter what. And Bill Gates, he's created a whole, I mean, he's attached to so much evil in this world. There's just not enough time to address it all. And central bank,
Yeah.
the central bank coins are the ones that are going to be the dangerous ones.
Yeah, because they're going to know every single transaction
Centralized
instantaneously.
crypto, that's where
Yeah, so the crypto will collapse because there'll be a
not only know
competing
you, control you.
centralized.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah,
You
because
don't get to
they
say
will.
because you were bad.
Mhm.
Yeah, exactly, and that's what they're doing in China now. That depending on your social credit score, you can't buy a soft drink,
Yeah, you can't
right?
have a job, you can't go
Yeah,
into a business, and
you
people
can't
actually
travel.
they actually get a negative credit score by associating with you.
Yeah, another thing
So
too. Another thing they're doing, Philip. They're putting time parameters on your savings to spend it, and if you don't spend it, the government seizes it. What's
yes,
that, Marcine? The government seizes it. Can you believe it, eh?
that is what a negative interest rate is.
Yeah.
It is the attack on your savings. It is not a benefit to your mortgage. I
Another
mean, I guess
thing,
technically it is, but yeah.
yeah. Another attack.
In time, yes, if you don't spend it in a reasonable time, they take it. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Another thing, attack on people's savings, a hidden tax that they don't realize is all the currency creation. The currency creation is
Oh
devaluing the
yes.
dollar, so your savings is devaluing.
Yes.
That's why some people are going to other assets like precious metals, silver, gold.
Yes.
Some people have gone to cryptos, which is fine, but that's still within the system and it's subject to regulation and competing centralized digitalized currency. So they could also go after gold and silver as well, right? There was one time when they actually seized them from
Yeah.
people.
True.
Yeah.
Yes.
Gold was
So
seized in U.S. in the
yeah,
30s, 1933. Yeah.
Yep.
so people need to decide what they do. But if you hold on to the currency, that's going to be devalued. And what's going to happen when there's a movement to a digitalized, centralized currency? What's going to happen to all your savings?
You won't have savings, and you'll be totally controlled.
Yes, completely
Yes.
controlled.
Yes. I mean, even your savings, though, even left in the bank with inflation as it is, your savings that would be $100 at 2.1% interest or whatever the number is, it's rather low. When inflation is, above 5% or certain rates, I'm just picking a number, but it's exponentially higher than what your earnings are in your savings. That in the beginnings is a tax, really, in
Yeah.
a way that whatever you do is defeating. And it is quite daunting and scary for people to know, well, are those savings going to be there when I retire or when I reach an old age, or is it worth saving? There is so much unknown and so much insecurity that's really created by either incomplete government policy or direct policy that seems to be counter to the individual's success, that people don't even know how to proceed anymore. And
Exactly.
yeah,
I should qualify that because what's happened since last year and this year is that most Canadians have been saving. That's their response to the lockdowns, is to save what little money they have. Philip.
Yeah.
But most Canadians don't understand the impact of money supply on their savings because it's never talked about in the mainstream. They don't realize that their savings are being devalued
Yes.
through this extreme money creation, money printing that's basically vertical right now, going straight up. The Bank of Canada, central bank, has started to taper that in Canada because I realize the whole thing's going to collapse. But apparently, other central banks are going to do the same, Marcin. But we'll have to see what happens. The economic outlook is pretty bleak, I'd say, on so many fronts. Pretty grim. So I'm going to move to the next comment. It says, quote, if you have a gun, you can rob a bank. If you have an international banking cabal, you can rob everyone.
That's a good
Yeah.
one.
Yeah. And imagine this international banking cabal, they have a centralized, digitalized currency. That's like an explanation point on there, isn't it?
Yes.
Because they can literally go in there and they can manipulate. They can do what China's doing, right? You got 2 months to spend all your savings. If you don't spend it, we're going to take it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
You could have a
about
minimum productivity allotment.
We don't like you. You know, we think you're a bad citizen. You've done this. You jaywalked. You were late for work. You were critical of the government. So we're going to decrease your wage by half.
Yeah.
Not only that, you are
Right?
shunned from society. You will be shamed and
Yeah.
shunned.
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
what's coming to
To the
here.
extent that
Remember,
some
there's a
people
lot.
don't even want to live.
There's a lot of Western companies working in China to help them set up their infrastructure.
Yeah.
People need to
I think
understand
one
that.
thing that needs to be pointed out, that's what you just mentioned, Stephen, is a really dark concept. And in order for some of those things to be done, literally where you're shunning everyone for just simple actions, we need to remember that, again, going back to the past, there were other groups that had to be removed or targeted before that. And that's the people who are the disabled, the frail, and the elderly.
Yep.
Yeah.
And those people are really our most vulnerable.
Yes.
And they will be, they often are the first targets in a lot of things. And
Yeah,
right now, without mentioning it, a lot of the restrictions target them the most.
Yeah. And look at the pastor. He was a target. He was an
Yes.
example. And he was an easy target because his church is really small compared to the major churches. Right? He's just a street church, right? Preacher, he feeds the poor. He doesn't have a lot of money, Philip. He's an
Yeah.
easy target. They wouldn't go after the Anglican Church of Canada or one of the big churches in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
No.
They're making
Right?
an example of that pastor because he has
Yeah.
words to say. Like, he speaks very well. So that guy needs to be made an example of.
Yes.
Yes.
I personally
And
think he's awesome.
he's an easy target.
He's telling the truth.
But he
Yeah.
is a target because he is a truth
Yeah,
speaker.
easy target. He's
And
been
he comes-
targeted before.
And he comes from a background, you know, a country where this has occurred. So he sees the signs more readily than Canadians do.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Canadians should really have been taught a better history of the movement in Poland and the solidarity movement and the past there in the 80s. And I was, again, a young child at the time, though I did read into it a little bit, and the involvement at the time of world governments and paramountly, honestly, the Pope to affiliate with those people in Poland in their time of need really allowed change of this political system and future of their country.
You know, one could argue that they've been mobilizing to this plan. I mean, you could clearly see them mobilizing at the turn, you know, in year 2000, and then down went the towers, and there went the first obvious loss of freedoms with the sham called airport security. Again, a complete and utter violation, but people just accepted it because it's for our own good and it's for our safety. So whenever the government says they're doing something for your benefit, that's always a red flag to me. That had nothing to do with safety. It had a lot to do with the beginning of the end of our freedoms. And then all this busyness while they were slowly taking it all away. You know, the social media and the buy stuff and stay open 24/7. All of this was just noise to distract us while they slowly destroyed our world.
Yeah.
And now
Excellent.
here we are.
Yeah. So we're going to have to be strong, provide leadership,
Be organized,
be an example. Also, be an example. Also obviously be clear in our message, Philip. But this is an opportunity.
I agree.
We have to lead by example. Question. I'm going to be doing a video tomorrow. I will be questioning what's going on in my particular community. And that's my right as a citizen. Rather than to sheep along, right? I'm going to question and get people thinking. And that's what we need to do. But look at this. This is a good quote by Coleman. Quote, in 2019, if you walked into a bank with a face mask, they'd call the cops. But now they'll call the cops if you're not wearing one.
I love this comment. I think about this all the time. Yeah, not that long ago, if you had your face covered with the police, you were in trouble. Now, shocking.
I've walked into a bank with a balaclava on. No issue. But if I did that before, it'd be like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it definitely does raise a lot of issues, and it does desensitize a person from another. You don't have the same emotional connection to a person when you can't see them smile. You can't see their frown. They're an entity more than a human, and
it's taking away our individual identity, isn't it?
Yes, and when you do that over time, especially with the disconnect of reducing social, you kind of develop your own molehill in the psychological aspect, so that you're now defending yourself from all those down below you from your hill, right? And you start to disconnect and disassociate from those that you should be more connected with, who are your fellow countrymen. And that's something that I've seen definitely coming to head. I know in my subdivision where I live, neighbors are a little bit distant, stand off from each other. There's more people reporting, oh, there's that person walking down the street than I've ever seen before. And I think it's simply because you've lost that connection with your fellow man.
Yeah. Here's another quote that's pretty pertinent. I just want to clarify the quote. It says, quote, there are no honest or trustworthy politicians. I would say establishment politicians left in our country or the world for the most part. I'm convinced. I go back to Shakespeare, if anybody's read Shakespeare, about the stage, and they're just actors on a stage. That's how I view these politicians. They're just puppets, literally puppets on a stage, and there's a huge machine behind them, right?
Yes.
So that's what's going on. People need to see through that. And I know you brought up that quote about the past, Philip, but Orwell made a good point. If you control the past, you control the future, type thing.
Exactly.
So it's about indoctrinating people, Ken. And if you control how they view history, you control the pathway into the current and future, and you can see a lot of that going on. There's revisionism going on, not only in Canada.
Big time.
Yeah, they're taking down monuments, right?
Thank goodness.
So there's all this stuff going on, but yeah, these establishment politicians, this is just a fraud, the whole system, as far as I'm concerned. But
Stephen.
hopefully we're standing out. I don't want to be like them. I don't think anyone here else wants to. We just want to do what's right for the people, right?
Yes. Yes. And
So
Stephen, to add that there does need to be some checks and balance for government, though, because at the end of the day, there is always the truth that power does consume and
yes, and
corrupt
I sent you
completely.
something on that. I sent
Yes.
you our governance proposal, right? So
Yes.
maybe you could do a statement about that. Like, remember, like we were discussing
Yes.
when you're ready.
Okay, sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
And, the other moment, I often bring up Joseph Stalin, and I have no respect for that man. However, he was a tyrant and important figure of history. And one of his famous quotes was that it is not enough that the people know that there is an election. The people that cast the votes decide nothing. The people who count the votes decide everything.
Yeah. Yeah. Good.
And so
And that links into the
when
digitalized component.
hmm,
And here's this on judges. Obviously, judges are not perfect. And TS is some of them accept bribes for their decision. It's just like a referee in sport; they may accept a bribe to make a certain call or help impact the outcome of the game, right? Or a judge in boxing, right? The judge is
yes,
paid to score the card a certain way.
yes, they do have some significant scrutiny, though, at least in Ontario.
Yes, they do. Yeah,
Yes, I can't speak to the others. I do have
yeah.
friends that did move on into the
This is a good one
judiciary.
too.
Yeah,
This is a good one on blackmail. They try and get something against someone to control them.
No matter what, on all levels, it's just a low vibration way to operate. Like,
Yes,
going forward, we cannot think like this anymore. Like, the only way to be successful going forward is to renew our thinking, because to retrace and do whatever we've done before it's broken. It's never going to work.
it's broken.
And
It's
why
completely
fix it?
broken.
Needs to be
Yeah.
scrubbed, heat pile, and fresh ideas need to be born.
And this is so pertinent here too. It's easier to fool someone than convince them they've been fooled. And that's one of the crux of the problem we're facing, I would argue.
Mhm.
There's definitely
Well,
some dissonance.
it
Yeah.
just points to a need to just keep pushing information out there, letting people know
Yes,
just how
100%.
things are right now so they can see it in front of their nose. Once you put it under their nose, then they can smell it for what it is. But a lot of times it's off in the distance, so they push it out of their mind. Then they turn around and go, oh, why do I have this problem? Why is this happening? As long as we keep pushing, they can make those connections. This is why this is a problem. This is why it's happening.
It's hard to tell
Hopefully we
people.
can present an effective change to it.
Yeah, exactly. Do you know about this, Marcine, the Georgia Guidestones?
Yes, I do. As a matter of fact, I know that they were recently defaced because the people just aren't going to take it anymore. I'm surprised they haven't torn them down by now, but they have been defaced.
Who actually created the stones?
It was an anonymous system, so obviously it was a deep state situation.
Yeah, it was a
The
deep state.
person, yeah.
I
And
see.
yeah, a tremendous
Yeah.
cost and anonymous.
So this is
Interesting.
basically outlines the agenda of the deep state.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Reduction to, 500 million people globally. So they've got a lot of.
Oh, I see. Right.
Yeah. And a whole bunch of other things. And the words are pretty, but they're very easy.
Yeah.
Just a bunch
Yeah.
of.
And there's this one.
Where's the revolution?
Yeah.
I think if we're not careful, and we may end up there. And I think that's one of our goals potentially. I don't know if everyone else would agree with me. I certainly feel this way. I am a patriot of this country. I do not want to see the end of a great, like what is a great nation and could be one of the greatest nations on earth, and has bountiful resources, unlimited potential. There's no reason we can't be successful. And if things are squandered the way it is, I honestly, I fear something like a 1798 French Revolution,
Yeah,
and
fair
that
enough.
was an absolute terror. Yeah.
Yeah, just understand this has been going on for decades. Incremental steps, regardless of who's in power. Philip,
Hmm.
right? In 1992, the so-called conservatives adopted UN Agenda 21. Fast
Yeah.
forward to 2015, the same party adopted UN Agenda 2030. Now
Yes.
those are all being implemented on all levels of government,
Hmm.
right?
That's
Just as
alarming.
we got this comment here. Wow, that's harsh, but there's a lot of truth to that. And also I think the puppeteering is really important now. It's just a stage, a distraction. Front people creating the facade of democracy, Philip,
Yes.
right? While, like I'll give you an example, Trump going to Biden, the two admins, it's like there was it just, you could see the deep state emotion, right? Biden's wasn't doing all these things in the background. There's a huge bureaucracy,
Hmm.
right?
Every power structure, thick with them.
Constitutional lawyers are now the only class allowed to run controlled opposition until Agenda 2025 eliminates 14 in 15. So maybe
Persons?
apparently they're going to be going after these constitutional lawyers next. That's what this is saying.
It's potential.
Yeah, potential for that.
Without restriction, anything could
Yeah.
happen.
Yes.
Going back to Poland, there was the historical case of the Katyn massacre, and that was where
Yeah.
over 10, I don't know if it was 10 to 20,000. I don't want to misquote. I apologize to anybody. I don't want to offend anybody. But over 10,000 Polish officers were marched off into the woods and executed.
Yeah.
Yep.
And they
Yeah.
were
Just realized here.
Yeah.
Just realized here, Trudeau, in my opinion, he's just he's the front establishment puppet right now. That's all he is.
Mhm.
So I think people, one of the good things that has happened over the last couple of years, people realize it now because of the disaster of Ford and Kenny. They realize that there's no difference between the so-called liberal, so-called conservative, right?
There's no difference.
There's no
Mhm.
difference.
Yes.
That's one of the good things coming out of this, Philip, is that
Mhm.
whole the economy is getting blown up.
Yes.
This is all too much to handle. Need to go for a walk for a while it's still legal.
Well, I hope you enjoy yourself. No.
Yeah.
Oh,
We just got a couple more comments. Germany won world. Look at here, Philip.
Yeah. Well, that's an interesting way to look at it. I know there's a
Yeah.
history aspect of the royal family of the Windsor, formerly the Gothenburg Haulers are in. I can't remember. I can't quote it properly, but they changed their last name to Windsor in 1914 to be more patriotic to the United Kingdom. Because they didn't want to air the impression that they were supporting the Kaiser. But I think we could disconnect a little bit of generational family history in that way potentially, but I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I wanted to go down to that
Yeah. Yeah.
long.
Exactly.
Yeah.
interestingly, they're all related.
Look
In
here.
some
Look here.
related and connected.
This is
Mhm.
showing some inherent bias.
Yes.
Interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, that was also one of the contractors that took on the contract for the essentially the government planning for the inventory and confiscation of firearms in Canada.
Yes.
So
Interesting.
the company that did inventory persons for termination is going to facilitate the confiscation and implementation of that OIC or Order in Council ban on certain firearms, and basically the removal of property from law-abiding citizens.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
Yeah, fair enough.
it's very interesting, isn't it?
Yes, it is. So we're going to close off now. Please review this. We didn't go too much into the Constitution because we'd be here all night, but we provided links in the video. So go look at it yourself. Go look at our amendments. And I think we can all agree today that we're dealing with a huge state apparatus that's pushing their own agenda and many times against the people. I personally encourage people to pick your battles. You can't take on the whole thing, so you need to pick certain segments. The most, as Philip mentioned, we need to expose what's going on, wake up more people. Any other comments from Ken, Marcine, on this topic today?
I think people ought to stay frosty and fight for their freedoms in every little way that they can and still be safe.
Yeah, we got to dig in. We can't give them an inch, right? It's every inch
Yeah,
we give
exactly.
is 2 inches. We got to fight back. It's
Yeah,
just the
Exactly.
nature of
stay steadfast
personal
and
freedom.
Yep.
Yeah. And don't be afraid. I'm going to do, we're going to continue to speak on these issues and provide leadership that way, Philip. Leadership by example, and show our fearlessness and our willingness to stand up to this soft tyranny, which could become hard tyranny someday, depending where it goes.
And I think we should. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Philip.
So I just wanted to stress that when we do say standing up, we're talking about a verbal protest. We're talking about speaking out so that others recognize that what's being done is wrong. We are not advocating like physical confrontations with the government, and nor will we. We are at people that are law-abiding citizens. We want a organized civil society, and we want to literally just through our message and through our voice be able to implement change of thought and change of action. And that's our goal. We are not an insurgency, and we would like to carry a message that we need to have change in this country.
Yeah, 100%.
Nicely
And
said.
it's really challenging, but please join us. The more members, supporters we have, the bigger our voice will be, the more impact we can have. It's very urgent now. You can see what's happening to our basic rights and freedoms. And based on the overall agenda, I would say it's only going to get worse before it gets better. It's really challenging. So we're going to continue to touch on all these important subjects, especially the financial and what they're doing with our currency and related to the Great Reset and controlling us through technology. That's real. Go to the World Economic Forum, you'll see it there. Bridging physical, digital, and biological into one. This isn't made up. So we're gonna have to keep going forward. We'll be doing more presentations, but I want to thank all our guests today for joining us, and thank you for all your comments. And this is making a difference, everyone. This is a good exercise in freedom of speech today. but there are serious concerns. All of us here can see it. All of us here can see it.
Thanks to you, Stephen, for keeping the platform available for people to say stuff. Thank you.
Well, we're going to bring more people in. That's what we want. We want a dialogue. We want different perspectives. We all benefit from that.
Yeah.
We may not agree with everything, but we're going to grow, right? So we have to bring more people in. This is the reality we're in. It's not only here in Canada. It's going on in the U.S., Britain, other parts of the West, in Asia, Central America, South America, all over Africa. This is a worldwide phenomenon we're facing. So we have to do our part. I would have never thought I'd be here today, Philip, going through high school, university, graduate school, that I'd be here seeing this.
Yes.
I've read Orwell. I've read the great authors. To actually see it happening now on the ground is very concerning.
Yes. Stephen, my
I want to add
yeah.
a final point. I've been thinking about this, and I'm pretty convinced that what we live in is not a democracy. And I'm trying to be real. It's a plutocracy.
Yeah.
We live in a plutocracy. There's a facade of democracy, and we're trying to change that. It has to be about the people on the ground. It has to be. And we got the reverse now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Power to the people.
So the struggle goes on. Thank you once again, everyone. Please share this so we can help wake up more people. We can continue the dialogue. And until next time, we wish you the best. Stay safe. Stay strong.
Take care.
Thank you.